Good afternoon, I'm Bakhtiar Aslanov and you're watching AnewZ. Let's see the top stories shaping our world. US President Donald Trump meets German Chancellor Friedrich Merz to discuss war in Ukraine, NATO and trade. Thousands of protesters rallied in Tel Aviv, call for an end to war with Hamas in Gaza and hostages release. International Atomic Energy Agency Director General Rafael Grossi visits Syria to clarify past nuclear activities. US President Donald Trump met with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz at the White House on Thursday, with discussions focusing on Ukraine, NATO and trade. While trade tensions lingered in the background, the tone between the two conservative leaders remained notably warm.
US President Donald Trump welcomed German Chancellor Friedrich Merz to the White House on Thursday.
Your message to the people of Germany.
Thank you very much. Thank you again. Fantastic.
The meeting focused on three major issues: defense spending, trade tariffs, and the war in Ukraine. Merz, who took office last month, said he was looking forward to strengthening ties with the US. On Ukraine, both leaders expressed concern about the ongoing conflict. They reaffirmed their continued support for Ukraine, with Germany now the second largest military and financial contributor after the US.
When I see the moment when we're not going to make a deal, when this thing won't stop,
Is there a deadline?
in that moment, yeah, it's in my brain, the deadline. When I see the moment where it's not going to stop, and I'm sure you're going to do the same thing, will be very, very, very tough. And it could be on both countries, to be honest. You know, it takes two to tango. But we're going to be very tough. Whether it's Russia or anybody else, we're going to be very tough. That's a bloodbath that's going on over there.
We both agree on this war and how terrible this war is going on. And we are both looking for ways to stop it very soon. And I told the president before we came in that he is the key person in the world who can really do that now by putting pressure on Russia. And we will have this debate later on again, how we can proceed jointly between the Europeans and the Americans. And I think we are we are having the duty to do something on that now, to stop it after 3.5 years, which is really terrible.
The two leaders also discussed trade issues, which, however, remain unresolved. The US and EU are still negotiating a possible deal that could be crucial for Germany's export-driven economy.
We will have a good trade deal. I mean, I guess that will be mostly determined by the European Union, but you're a very big part of that, so you'll be involved. But we'll end up hopefully with a trade deal, or we'll do something, you know, we'll do the tariffs. I mean, I'm okay with the tariffs, or we make a deal with the trade, and I guess that's what we're discussing now. I know that you're spending more money on defense now, and quite a bit more money, and that's a positive thing. I'm not sure that General MacArthur would have said it's positive, you know. He wouldn't like it, but I sort of think it's good. You understand what I mean by that?
I understand.
He made a statement, never let Germany rearm. And I said, I always think about that when he says, sir, we're spending more money on defense. I say, oh, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think it's a good thing.
Trump reiterated calls for NATO allies to spend more on defense, but hinted at limits for Germany, citing historical sensitivities.
Joining me now is Dinis de Oliveira Fernandes, a political analyst from Lisbon, Portugal. Mr. Fernandes, welcome to the program and thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Fernandes, let me start with the Washington meeting. What is the significance of Chancellor Merz urging President Donald Trump to take a tougher stance on the Kremlin at this particular moment in the war?
Well, this is a crucial moment for every party involved. So on one side, you have Ukraine and you have the rest of Europe. And on the other side, you have the United States of America. I'm speaking with you from Lisbon, from Portugal. And we had a major blackout a couple of weeks ago. We had, I would say, fake news going around that we were being attacked by Russia, which was not proved to be true. It was a regular blackout. But as you can see, the people of Europe are a bit scared, I would say. So the European governments really do need to invest in cybersecurity. And as the President of the United States said, Germany rearming is not the most popular thing, I would say, at least when it comes to history. But it is a reality, and it is something that's on the table at the moment.
Mr. Fernandes, how do you interpret the optics of President Donald Trump hosting Merz so soon after NATO's decision to raise defense spending to 5%? Is this signaling stronger transatlantic unity, or are there lingering divisions?
Well, I think that we all know that the American president is quite unpredictable, and European leaders know that as well. So I would say that, at least from an academic point of view, the relation between the European Union and America is not at its greatest moment right now. The member states of NATO have been respecting, and they haven't respected the budget they should respect. But at the same time, both Europeans, the people of Europe, and the leaders of Europe do not trust America, at least as much as they did in the past before we had Trump in his first term. So, on one hand, rearming Europe, rearming Germany, and spending more of the GDP in defense and on NATO specifically is not as popular as you would think it is, because at the same time, it would also mean austerity measures when it comes to economics. It would probably mean, and several leaders have said that it would probably mean cuts when it comes to public health, to public schools. And Europeans do not want that. Europeans don't want to. There are several problems when it comes to public health, to public schooling in the European countries that have that, which is the vast majority. So if Europe, and I think it's a reality, again, from an academic point of view, I think it's a reality that Europe is going to rearm. Europe has said that they want to rearm, but it is not as popular as you think it is, because they even had to change the name of the whole rearming program. They first came with the name Rearm Europe, but it didn't have the best impact on the people of Europe. It received a lot of criticism. And I can see why. I understand why. People do not want a war. And even though the people of Europe have shown a tremendous solidarity with the people of Ukraine, at the same time, they are getting a bit, I would say, tired of the conflict. And I live really far away. As you said, I live in Portugal. I live really far away from Ukraine. And I come from a privileged position. But I cannot imagine how tired the people of Ukraine are. So at the same time, I understand why the people of Europe outside Ukraine are tired and don't want to spend money on the conflict. But on the same time, I understand that Ukraine needs help. Ukraine needs more arms. Ukraine needs more, and something more that Europe is not doing.
Chancellor Merz mentioned that the European Union is looking for more pressure on Russia. In concrete terms, what additional levers does the West still have at its disposal?
Well, Europe was built on peace, not war, so Europe does not have much leverage. Europe has sanctions, and European leaders have said that they want to spend to have additional sanctions, sanction package on Russia. And that can debilitate Russia when it comes to industry, when it comes to economics, when it comes also to Russian oligarchs that have a lot of their assets in Europe. And that money from the sanctions can be spent on rearming Ukraine or helping Ukraine somehow, or even rearming Europe if it's enough money. And what I said in the beginning, cybersecurity is truly crucial. So cybersecurity is not my field of expertise, but European studies is, and communication is. And when it comes to communication, the people of Europe they're afraid of Russia. And I can see why. I understand why. Russia is known for having a lot of power when it comes to hackers, when it comes to what we have now, which is cyber warfare. So I would say that the two main leverage points for the European Union is to defend itself when it comes to cybersecurity, and to have the additional sanctions package that the leaders have proposed. But Europe is truly dependent on NATO. There is no such thing as European defense. There is no such thing as a European army. So, well, you have the common defense policy, which is not enough. The armies of Europe are not even coordinated when it comes to arms, when it comes to even to technology. So Europe is extremely dependent on the United States, not because they want, but because it was built like that. Because, well, Germany lost 2 world wars. Before the First World War, it lost the war with France, between Prussia and France in 1870. And Germany rearming itself is not something normal, you know, when it comes to history, it's not something ordinary. It's something that it shows that the relationship between Europe and the United States, it's at its lowest point in my way of seeing it. Because Germans do not trust the United States anymore because Trump is not as stable as it should be. But do Europeans trust Germany when it comes to rearming itself? Because if we see the polls, the German polls, if we see who has been winning elections, it's the far right, it's AfD. So I wouldn't say that Europeans trust Germany when it comes to political stability, when it comes to rearming itself, and when it comes to leading Europe, even though Germany is a country that spends the most GDP on the European Union and also NATO.
Political analyst Dinis de Oliveira Fernandes, thank you very much once again for your insights and for joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
In a rare 90-minute phone call, U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping agreed to resume trade negotiations, addressing issues like rare earth exports and Taiwan. The call initiated by Trump marked the first direct conversation between the two leaders since Trump's return to office, while both sides described the discussion as positive. With mutual invitations to visit each other's countries, concrete agreements remain elusive. Trump announced that the United States would soon resume importing rare earth minerals from China, a critical component for various industries. Despite the optimistic tone, Asia markets responded with caution. President Donald Trump lashed out against Elon Musk, saying he was disappointed by the billionaire's public opposition to the sweeping tax cut and spending bill that is at the heart of Trump's agenda.
The once rosy relationship between President Donald Trump and Elon Musk has dramatically soured, culminating in a public and bitter feud. President Donald Trump has publicly expressed his disappointment in Elon Musk following Musk's criticism of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and threatened to revoke federal contracts with Musk's companies, including Tesla and SpaceX.
But I'm very disappointed because Elon knew the inner workings of this bill better than almost anybody sitting here, better than you people. He knew everything about it. He had no problem with it. All of a sudden he had a problem, and he only developed the problem when he found out that we're going to have to cut the EV mandate, because that's billions and billions of dollars, and it really is unfair. We want to have cars of all types. Electric, we want to have electric, but we want to have a gasoline, combustion. We want to have different. We want to have hybrids. We want to have all. We want to be able to sell everything. And when that was cut, and Congress wanted to cut it, he became a little bit different, and I can understand that. But he knew every aspect of this bill.
Trump insinuated that Musk's disapproval stemmed from the bill's reduction of electric vehicle subsidies, which would directly impact Tesla. He accused Musk of suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, implying that Musk's criticisms were more about personal grievances than policy disagreements. Elon Musk's net worth took a staggering hit recently, dropping by nearly $34 billion in a single day. This sharp decline was primarily due to a 14% plunge in Tesla's stock, which wiped out approximately $152 billion in the company's market capitalization. Despite this massive loss, Musk remains the world's richest person, with a net worth of approximately $335 billion.
At least 4 people were killed and 20 injured in a major Russian missile and drone attack on Kiev overnight, Ukrainian officials said. Kiev's mayor confirmed that 16 of the injured were hospitalized. Authorities also said that over 400 drones and more than 40 missiles, including ballistic missiles, were used in the overnight massive strikes across the country. A drone hit an apartment building in the Solomyansky district, blasting a hole in the structure and crushing cars below. The metro system was disrupted and rail lines damaged, forcing some trains to be rerouted. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called on the US, Europe and other countries to ramp up pressure on Russia in response to the latest attack. Moscow has vowed retaliation for Ukrainian strikes on missile launch system in the Bryansk region. Earlier, Russian President Vladimir Putin held a phone call with US President Donald Trump, saying he will have to respond to Ukraine's attack on Russia's strategic bombers.
Ukraine says it has struck Russian missile launch systems near the border, while Moscow threatens retaliation for a series of recent drone and sabotage attacks. Tensions continue to escalate as both military operations and diplomatic messaging intensify. The Ukrainian military said it targeted Russian missile systems in Russia's Bryansk region, near the Ukrainian and Belarusian borders on Thursday. According to Ukraine's general staff, one missile launcher detonated, while two others were likely damaged. Officials in Kyiv said the Russian systems were preparing to target Ukraine's capital. This follows Ukraine's drone strikes last weekend on Russian air bases in Siberia and the far north, reportedly damaging several strategic bomber aircraft. Separately, Russia accused Ukraine of destroying 2 rail bridges in the south of the country. 7 people were reported killed. Ukraine has not confirmed involvement. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov labeled the incident state terrorism.
Of course, the fact that Kiev regime acquired all features of terroristic regime cannot be ignored in future. This fact will be taken into account. But you know that during yesterday's meeting of Russian President Vladimir Putin with the government, our Minister of Foreign Affairs expressed the position that, despite this fact, it is necessary to continue the contacts at the working level with Ukraine.
The Kremlin says President Vladimir Putin discussed the situation in a phone call with US President Donald Trump on Wednesday. Putin stated Russia will respond to Ukrainian attacks at a time and in a manner determined by its military leadership. In Washington, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, met with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Andriy Yermak described the talks as very important and reiterated Ukraine's position that it must win the war.
We need more air defense. It's still a very big problem for us because we can't protect our city, and in a difference, as I said in my speech, in a difference of the Russians, we work for against the especially military objects. Unfortunately, Russia continue attack our civilians. We are very appreciate that nevertheless of the lot of circumstances, President Trump continued to work and continued to demonstrate that he really want to end this war. In this way, it's not a simple way, and it's necessary that really Russia will start to demonstrate the political will.
President Trump, who has pushed for renewed peace efforts, said the Ukraine war remains the deadliest European conflict since World War II. He said Putin considered recent peace talks useful, but claimed Ukraine had disrupted negotiations through continued attacks. With military strikes expanding and diplomatic efforts facing setbacks, the situation on the ground remains fluid.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has said member states have offered broad support for new military spending targets amid mounting pressure from Washington to commit to a dramatic increase in military spending.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte says there has been broad support from member states to increase military spending targets. The new defense targets suggest that member states raise military spending to 5% of their GDP, with 3.5% going towards core military spending and another 1.5% for defense and security-related investments. Rutte's comments come after a meeting of defense ministers from the 32-country transatlantic military alliance at its headquarters in Brussels on Thursday.
there's broad support. I think Pete Hack said when he left the building today, he said near consensus. So we're really close. But always, when this is a big decision. What we did today was a big decision, agreeing on the capability targets. I mean, this is we use this word often, historic. But I think we are allowed today to use that word. That the decision today is historic.
NATO's current target level for military spending, agreed at a summit in Cardiff in 2014, is 2% of the GDP. But US President Donald Trump has repeatedly claimed that European allies and Canada do not spend enough compared to the United States. Rutte confirmed that the new goal would apply to all allies, including the United States, and expressed confidence that a final agreement will be reached ahead of the Hague summit, scheduled to begin on June 24.
Tensions flared in Israel as both pro- and anti-government protesters took to the streets. Demonstrations were held in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, with supporters backing judicial reforms, while others demanded an end to the war following this October 7th Hamas attack.
In Tel Aviv, thousands of protesters gathered in Rabin Square on Thursday, demanding an end to the ongoing war that erupted after the deadly Hamas-led attack on October 7th.
We are holding a protest here when the first call is to end the war. This is a political war. It doesn't provide any safety or security, not to our soldiers, not to the hostages, and also not to the people in Gaza. It's purely a political war, and we are standing here together in Rabin Square when Prime Minister Rabin was assassinated, calling for the end of the war, because everything is connected to everything. And once this war ends, we can start rebuilding Israel and the region.
Demonstrators called for a political resolution to the conflict and voiced frustration over the government's handling of the crisis. Protesters marched through the city streets, lighting smoke flares and clashing with police. Security forces intervened to disperse parts of the crowd, forcibly removing some demonstrators as tensions escalated. Meanwhile, a pro-government demonstration was held outside Israel's Supreme Court in Jerusalem, organised by several right-wing groups. Supporters gathered to back the Israeli government's policies, including judicial reform. The rally was attended by several members of parliament.
The United Nations has honored 168 staff members who died in service last year. The majority of them were killed in Gaza. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres called for accountability.
At the UN headquarters in New York, a memorial service was held to honor staff who died in service in 2024. Of the 168 personnel remembered, 126 were killed in Gaza, the highest single-year toll in the UN's history. Most of those killed were working for the UN Relief and Works Agency.
We have suffered unspeakable and unprecedented losses in Gaza. This past year alone, 126 of our colleagues were killed in Gaza, including 125 women and men who worked for UNRWA. Some were killed with their families. I repeat my call for full accountability.
Guterres said more than 1 in every 50. The UN Relief and Works Agency staff in Gaza had been killed and warned against the growing global acceptance of violence against aid workers. He stressed that the UN will not accept the killing of civilians, journalists, or humanitarian staff as the new normal. He also highlighted the dedication of the fallen personnel, describing their work not as jobs, but as acts of service carried out without seeking recognition. At a time of global division, he said their sacrifice should serve as a reminder of the value of international cooperation and shared humanity.
International Atomic Energy Agency Director General Rafael Mariano Grossi led a team of safeguards inspectors to examine sites in Damascus as part of efforts to address Syria's past nuclear activities. The visit follows an agreement reached with Syrian President Ahmad al-Sharaa, granting Grossi and his team immediate and unrestricted access to locations relevant to resolving long-standing concerns about the nation's nuclear program. Grossi shared the development in a post on social media platform X, describing the inspection as a critical and transparent step towards resolving outstanding issues. Thousands of Muslim pilgrims gathered in Mecca on Friday to mark Eid al-Adha, one of the most sacred festivals in Islam, amid the annual Hajj pilgrimage. From early morning prayers and the Grand Mosque to the symbolic rituals in Mina, the occasion drew worshippers from around the world.
Thousands of Muslims filled Mecca's Grand Mosque at sunrise on Friday, offering Eid al-Adha prayers during one of the most significant moments of the annual Hajj pilgrimage. Hajj, the fifth pillar of Islam, is a once-in-a-lifetime obligation for all physically and financially able Muslims. It brings together millions from across the globe in a powerful display of faith, unity and devotion. Later in the morning, pilgrims made their way to Mina to perform the stoning of the devil ritual. At the Jamarat site, they threw small pebbles at 3 stone pillars, an act symbolizing the rejection of evil, first carried out by the Prophet Ibrahim. The ritual marks the first day of Eid al-Adha, the festival of sacrifice. This year's pilgrimage continues over several days as pilgrims complete a series of rites passed down over 14 centuries, honouring tradition while strengthening their spiritual connection.
Environmental concerns are mounting in Armenia as alarming levels of heavy metal pollution threaten river ecosystems and public health. At the center of international concern is the Debed River, which connects to both Georgia and Azerbaijan.
Images from Armenia's Debed River, also known as Pambak, previously known as Tona River, expose dangerous levels of pollution. This issue rings environmental alarm bells in Armenia, where unchecked mining operations are threatening not only local ecosystems but the health and safety of the entire South Caucasus region.
We study the microinvertebrates that are eaten by fish, and based on the consistency, quantity and variety of species, we determine the ecological condition of the water.
This river is also linked to the Aktala and Alaverdi mines. The toxic wastewater basins violate environmental norms and endanger cross-border river systems shared by Georgia and Azerbaijan.
I measure the physico-chemical parameters of the river using the YSI device, which we received as part of the EU Water Initiative Plus. The same process took place on our side, in Armenia and in Georgia. The operational goal was achieved, and we met our Georgian partners, although from a distance.
The Debed feeds into the Kura River, ultimately reaching the Caspian Sea. This means the damage extends far beyond Armenia's borders, raising urgent regional concerns. Scientific studies confirm heavy metal contamination in water samples from 2013 and 2014, showing reduced aquatic biodiversity, particularly among phytoplankton, and raising red flags for human health in surrounding communities. Local NGOs like the Community Resistance and Contribution Centre are calling for accountability, while international watchdogs say Armenia must comply with treaties like the Espoo Convention. NGOs from 13 countries have appealed to the UN and Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, demanding independent monitoring and transparency from Armenia on environmental impacts affecting the entire region. So far, there's been no adequate response, but civil society isn't backing down, insisting that without urgent international action, this cross-border crisis will only deepen.
The heads of government of the Commonwealth of Independent States met in Tajikistan on Thursday, where they signed several agreements.
The Council of Heads of Government of the Commonwealth of Independent States meeting is led by Tajik Prime Minister Kohir Rasulzoda and attended by leaders from Russia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Armenia and Turkmenistan. The Commonwealth of Independent States, CIS, is a regional organisation of former Soviet republics. It aims to promote cooperation in politics, economics, security and cultural ties among its member countries. Kyrgyzstan's Prime Minister Akilbek Japarov reports that trade between Kyrgyzstan and other CIS countries grew by 10% last year, making up over 37% of the country's total trade. Exports accounted for 48%, while imports made up 34%. Azerbaijan's Prime Minister Ali Asadov highlighted the growing economic ties within the CIS. He notes that trade increased by 7% in 2024 and surged 43% in the first 4 months of 2025. Asadov also emphasises Azerbaijan's key role in regional transport and energy projects. He reminds the leaders that the third CIS Games will take place from September 28th to October 8th in Ganja and other cities. During the meeting, several important agreements are signed. The leaders agree to cooperate on developing heavy engineering industries and update public health plans across the CIS. A new charter for the CIS Volunteer Forum is approved to boost youth exchange and cooperation. Additionally, a joint communication system for the armed forces is adopted and a new badge is established to recognise tourism development in the region.
Uzbekistan secured their first ever FIFA World Cup spot with a 0-0 draw against the United Arab Emirates on Thursday. Goalkeeper Utkir Yusupov made key second-half saves to deny the host, while Abosbek Feyzullayev struck the bar for the visitors. The result guarantees Uzbekistan's place at the 2026 finals, marking a historic achievement since gaining independence in 1991. Celebrations erupted in Tashkent as fans poured into the streets to mark the country's first appearance on football's biggest stage. The Gulf Cooperation Council has issued a joint call for peace in Afghanistan, calling for aid, rights protections and the crackdown on terror threats. For more on that, we go to Kabul and our Tamim Bahis.
In a rare unified message, the Gulf Cooperation Council, or the GCC, has voiced strong support for peace and stability in Afghanistan, underscoring the country's importance to regional and global security. The GCC is a regional bloc made up of 6 Arab nations: Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. While the group often shares common goals in foreign policy, their dealings with Afghanistan's interim authorities have varied. Qatar and the UAE in particular maintain more active ties. Qatar hosted Taliban-US peace talks even before the Taliban's return to power, and the UAE recently accepted a Taliban-appointed ambassador. In a joint statement released after a recent ministerial meeting, the GCC reaffirmed its commitment to the Afghan people. The Council emphasized that lasting security and stability in Afghanistan would not only serve the aspiration of its citizens, but also bolster regional and international peace. The statement called for continued international humanitarian and economic aid to Afghanistan, highlighting the urgent need to ease the suffering of millions facing poverty and instability. Crucially, the GCC also stressed the importance of guaranteeing women's rights to education and employment, and called for protection of minorities, an indirect but clear message to the Taliban-led authorities. Lastly, the Council warned that Afghan territory must not be used by terrorist organizations or drug traffickers, a long-standing concern in regional security circles. As the international community continues to weigh its engagement with the Taliban, the GCC's message sends a clear signal. Peace in Afghanistan is not just a domestic matter, it's a regional priority. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for AnewZ.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to AnewZ.